Okay, good morning everyone. We might just get started with this. My name's Greg Freeman and I'm the facilitator really of this panel discussion this morning with all of these wise people. Thanks for coming along. I think the objective of today, and we've got it down as the past, the present and the future, but obviously to learn from the past, analyse the present and somehow predict what's going to happen in the future. And I think it's important to try and make it interactive because not only the people up here who have a collective something like 140 years of experience, but in the room there's obviously a lot of experience and knowledge and ideas, and so I think it's important to treat it as a session of interchange of ideas as much as anything else. And I think it's also important that there's outcomes for you to take out of the room. And I think in this sort of context, if you can go back to your workplace and sort of contemplate where you see the trends heading and how you can apply that to your day-to-day job, and even some of the experience these people have had and their ideas going forward, I think all of that is really useful in the workplace, and also have a bit of fun because some of the stories some of these people may have might have a bit of humour. You never know. So look, firstly I'd just like to introduce each of them so you know who's up here. And so going from right to left, our elder statesman Ron. Ron's a legend in our industry and he currently works as Technical Director for MRA Consulting. He's a past president of Waste Management Association. In fact, I think in the early days, Ron, when it was basically established, Ron was involved. He's a great thinker and a great problem solver. He's originally a chemical engineer, but don't hold that against him because there's a couple of those people around. And he thrives on detailed analysis. But Ron also loves escaping the city, going camping and fishing with a group of friends and family. The trouble is, he annoys everyone by insisting on visiting the local tip as he passes through. I mean, I must say I'm guilty of that too. There's something weird about that. And his family still mock him as the only person they know who wasn't too upset when the toilet cistern broke. He just happened to be hoarding a spare from the bathroom renovation 20 years earlier. I don't know what that says. But Ron brings a deep waste experience, analysis and insight to this panel. The next is Anne Prince. Anne also is a pioneer in the waste industry with more than 40 years. That makes us feel old, doesn't it, when you say it like that? 40 years in the community, commercial and charity sectors in Australia, Europe, Asia and the Pacific. From working at a council who was the first to introduce mobile garbage bins, I think Ku-ring-gai, is that right? Which year was that?
I started in 78 and finished in 82. 78
to 82, well, that gives it away. State-based litter reduction programs advocating for the recycling sector. Anne was the CEO of the Australian Council of Recyclers, founding Waste Aid, and I don't know how many of you might be aware, but Waste Aid has been going now probably for 10 years or so. And I remember at this conference it being launched, and it's just such a great initiative that Anne instigated all that time ago. And that was to shine light on poor waste issues in First Nations communities and raised $6 million to deliver projects and programs, educating us all on that. Anne leaves many legacies. Her single biggest personal achievement is not what you might think. She's a country girl born and bred, and it was raising pet lambs, Shirl and Sean, during COVID. Great name. Anne brings business innovation, understanding of Indigenous communities and a wide consulting experience to the panel. So next we have Ron Smith. There's always got to be a joker, doesn't there? Ron started out as a garbo back in the day, which was what, in the 70s? 1974. See, 1970. Was that everyone born in that year? Like, he's risen through the ranks to work in management roles at several councils. He's currently at Penrith Council. Prior to that was at Sutherland Council, these being two of the biggest councils in New South Wales. Ron can drive trucks with crash gearboxes and reminisces about simpler days of work and play. He brings the very practical insights, human observations and some new ideas for this panel. So welcome, Ron. Stuart Baird's our next panel member. Stuart's been in the industry only a short time and he's had a lot of varied experience in that time running solid post collections in New South Wales for Cleanaway. Through COVID and managing keeping sites running through lockdowns, through the acquisition and integration of Suez assets in the middle of Sydney's wettest year, he's now an executive member of WACRA New South Wales. Stuart's also a chemical engineer background, places him well to approach the challenges and opportunities the industry faces. When not working, Stuart loves spending time and travelling with his young family, and he, I think, brings new approaches out of industry, from other industries' experiences to this panel, which nicely balances it. And our last panel member, Kat Heinrich, is the Director and Principal Consultant at Rawtech, one of Australia's leading consultancies in waste management and the circular economy. Over the past 12 years, she has helped shape government policy, business strategy and innovation in the circular economy. She chaired the International Solid Waste Association Young Professionals Group, and her work has taken her to dump sites in Nicaragua, food waste processing facilities in Italy, and running a waste fundraiser in New York. In 2018, Kat was awarded the GSIA Women in Circular Economy Leadership Award, and when she's not working, you'll find Kat planning her next cycling adventure. This year, she's heading to Norway to go backpacking in the Arctic. Kat brings an innovative world experience, consulting and youthful look to our panel. So thank you, everybody, and welcome. Okay, to get on with it, I think we'd just like to, I suppose, start with each of the more experienced members here to reflect a bit. So Ron, if you first would just have a few words about what you think our industry has achieved over the last 30 years. You might just need... Oh, sorry, Ron Wainberg. I said the most experienced. Oh, yeah, you can just do it from there, Ron.
All right. Excuse me. Thank you, Greg, and thank you for the opportunity to have an old man's whinge at what's been going on. The last 30 years, actually in my case, 32 years, has been a remarkable journey. If you go back to 1990 and compare it to today, we make 3 times more waste than we did back then. But we recover 25 times more than what we used to recover. That in itself is an amazing achievement, which I think everybody should take credit for. But that's not the end of the story, and therein lies the problem, which I'll come to. Source separation's become the norm. I live in Coringa, and I remember the rapid rail when it was brought out. It was a wonderful innovation, and it was so big, 360 litres, so much more than 55. I get rid of so much stuff. Now all households have got 3, 4, sometimes in Victoria 5 bins, which means that there is a lot more source separation, which of course improves the ability to divert from landfill and recover resources. The community's got broader acceptance of resource recovery. Indeed, you know, when I tell people, what do you do? I work in waste management. They're into it. They love to talk about recycling. What happens to the plastics? What happens to the bottles? Why do we landfill paper? So on and so on. They love talking about it. The community's engaged. That wasn't the case 30 years ago. Environmental standards have improved, which is a big tick. There's become a community recognition of greenhouse gas impacts and climate impacts, and that feeds back into waste. You didn't have that 30 years ago. Everyone was oblivious. We all loved to backyard burn. I remember our green waste, and around our area, you couldn't see for the smoke on a Saturday afternoon. Collection technologies have changed dramatically. You don't have Ron Smith and his team with 55-litre garbage bins heaving them up onto the back of a truck. It's all mechanised and a lot safer. There have been serious changes to the waste levy. The waste levy actually goes back to, I think it's the early 70s, it was about 20 cents a tonne that was imposed by the then Metropolitan Waste Management Authority, which was to encourage little things that they did. And it's grown from 20 cents a tonne at that time to 155, whatever it is today, and going north. It's a good thing. And of course, out of that levy, we've had the Waste Less, Recycle More investments in New South Wales, which I think was a tremendous effort to try and get things going. That's all the positives, but life isn't about just positives, there's negatives. I think, looking back on it, despite the incredible changes and the advances we've made, there's a lot of unrealised potential, which really, really frustrates me. We're talking now about green waste, for example, and the New South Wales EPA has come up with a green waste plan. We're going to make all households have FOGO. We're talking about banning it banning food waste from landfill and so on. All good stuff. But for heaven's sakes, there was an EPA plan in 1997 to do just that. Why did it not go anywhere? That's a missed opportunity. The Waste Less, Recycle More program, which I thoroughly endorse, I don't want to poo-poo it, it was done without the background of a strategic framework on what to do. In other words, we're investing in resource recovery and waste diversion without having an overall map of where we're trying to achieve what. And I think that was a missed opportunity. Central waste planning. Back then, with the with the Metropolitan Waste Disposal Authority, we had one government body that did the central planning for waste, that said where the tips should be, where the transfer stations should be, what infrastructure would be needed. It's all gone. It's all been disbanded. It's all been given to private industry, which, okay, it's a good thing that industry's involved, but there's no one coordinating, as far as I can see, the overall effort. The current waste strategy that the government put out, it's a great start, but there's no action plan in it. There's nothing specifically saying what we're going to do. That's a missed opportunity. And lastly, I'd like to lament on the technical things that we tried and unfortunately failed, but that's the life of technology. Who here remembers the Swerth in Wollongong? Arrow Bio down at Jack's Gully. I read in the paper on Monday that there's now talk that the bioelectric plant in Shoalhaven is going to be a non-starter, that's going to collapse. It's a shame. All these great technical innovations, which for various reasons never got off the ground, it's a pity, but that's the nature of technology development. That's the way it is. And it shouldn't let us, in the waste game, in local government, be put off.
Thanks,
anyway,
Ron.
that's my thoughts.
Thanks, Ron. Anne, how would you like to approach that question?
Okay, so Greg asked us to go back 30 years, and I'm going to go back 40. And I was young. I was very young. But I worked at Ku-ring-gai Council for 10 years, and we did. We had unlimited, twice-a-week collection of 55-litre bins. The old bins that Oscar in Sesame Street still sort of crawled out of. We had 5 people on a collection crew. There was 3 that were actually working. One was always on sick leave, and the other one was normally on workers' comp. And not much has changed. And I had a visionary boss. And I've had a lot of visionary bosses, but this guy went to the States, came back with this idea of getting rid of all these people, getting rid of all these problems, and basically moving to a mobile garbage bin. And so he imported from America the first side-loaded collection vehicles and the first mobile garbage bins. And yes, they were 340 litres, and they were big. But that was the way of trying to pacify the Ku-ring-gai residents who generated a lot of waste, because affluence equals consumption, then and now. So that revolutionised collection, and it revolutionised containerisation of waste, which then also revolutionised work health and safety. And we see the legacy of that today. So the 80s saw a huge mass movement towards mobile garbage bins nationally. In the 90s, the federal government for the first time set packaging recycling targets on industry and said, you have X amount of years to reach these targets, or else we're going to introduce CDS or something else. So there were some punitive measures at the end, which is something that we've talked about at this conference, which seems to be lacking now. So the beverage industry panicked and thought, my God, we make this stuff, we put it out there, but we don't know how to get it back and we don't know what to do with it. So I got the gig of managing a program called Recycle Sydney, which then became Recycle New South Wales. And in the space of 3 years, we went from 0 to 89% of Sydney householders having a weekly recycling service on garbage day with a black 1 or 2 recycling crates that had a high percentage of recycled content. So we tried to put it all back, all the material we were collecting, back into black crates. That was one of the most significant step changes, I think. We had wheelie bins, then all of a sudden we had a recycling bin. And because the amount of packaging that was generated by householders and the enthusiasm that the community had for recycling, we then went to wheelie bins and MRFs to be able to process the amount of packaging that was being generated. So industry had to have an evolution, and the community had an absolute revolution in the 90s. And that was when we had holes in the ozone layer, we were planting trees, and the mandate was think globally, act locally. And then in the year 2000s, or the early 2000s, we had, I think, an inspirational environment minister who was bold and brave and said, right, we're going to ban green waste to landfill by the year 2000. And what that did was drove everybody into having another bin, which was for garden organics. And yes, we had issues, with contamination that we had to manage, but it really stopped the backyard burning of garden waste throughout Sydney and put us into the third bin option. It's then taken us 22 years, from 2000 to last year, to have a mandate on food waste diversion. And food waste was the single largest component of our municipal bins. It's taken us 22 years. We've lost 20 years of doing really nothing but twinkering at the edges. We let industry tell us why we couldn't do things in terms of the packaging industry. And we've had this proliferation of EPR programs for every conceivable problematic waste, but they're all achieving not very much, in my opinion. The only EPR programs that have really achieved anything are those that have been mandated, like the CDS program, which is absolutely a success. South Australia, if you look around the country, I think South Australia had the vision and the leadership. We just failed to listen and we failed to learn. They had CDS 40 years, CDS for 40 years. They banned plastic bags decades ago. They've banned single-use plastics. They, in my view, are the visionary state in Australia. We've had food waste plastic, they had food waste pilots back in 2010. So I think New South Wales has been a bit of a slow learner. We just talked more and more and did less and less. The landfill levy was supposed to drive behaviour change. The Waste Less Recycle More program was amazing, but it really took somebody like Steve Beeman to take it up to industry and to basically say we are having a CDS, and for all the reasons that the cost benefits showed and the RISs showed, and then to put a structured Waste Less Recycle program together to get some of that landfill levy money back and hypothecate back to the waste industry rather than going to consolidated revenue. We as a local government and as an industry have spent decades trying to educate, motivate and get the public doing it right. I think the war on waste, if you're an ABC watcher, which I guess is our vintage, but I think that single program probably did more than 30 years of council speak and an absence of mass media programs from either the state or the Commonwealth. We've got we had a slip, slop, slap campaign and a click, clack, front, back. We know about how to wear our seatbelts. We know how to stop sun cancers. We don't know how to recycle. And we really haven't done a very good job at doing that at all. So I just want a show of hands in terms of, one of the dumbest things I think we ever did was we put 7 plastic polymer codes inside a recycling triangle and then told the community, but you can't recycle those polymers. Like, what were we thinking? Or what was the plastics industry thinking? So I want a show of hands. Who thinks we should leave our plastic lids on our plastic containers when we put them in the bin? So those that think we should have lids on, show of hands. Okay, show of hands of those that think, no, we should take them off. And a show of hands of those that really don't know. So if we don't bloody know, how the hell is Joe Blow Public supposed to know what to do? We have confused ourselves with the complexities of packaging. And I think that was a really good illustrative point, that we are the advocates of the system and we are confused about what to do. Data's my game, and I don't think we use data to make evidence-based decisions. We had governments that wanted to ban, we're going to have 50% diversion from landfill, and then the next state says, oh, we'll go 60. And then ACT says, oh, we'll go zero waste by 2010. The only problem was that Graham Mannell, who wrote the strategy for 2010, was still there in 2010, and they're a long way away from zero waste. So we've got to use data better. I think we lack leadership. We lack real leadership, both at a government and at a political level. We did have bold leaders like Steve. We had bold leaders like Mike Baird as the Premier who introduced CDS, but we need more of that. I think the problem I think is illustrated by the number of the two numbers I heard yesterday. One from Joe Picken was that we're currently generating 75 million tonnes of waste. We're recycling 6% of that is being recycled from the MSW sector. Only 6%, and globally we're generating 2 million tonnes of waste, and by 2050 it'll be 3.5 billion tonnes. So we have failed. We've failed your generation and we've failed future generations. And I just think we have to be bold and brave, or we are going to sink in a sea of crap.
That was a pretty good history lesson. Thanks, Ian. Always good for
I'll
that.
get rid of that.
So Ron Smith.
I'll get rid of that. And something Dr. Picken said yesterday was along the lines of people manage waste on site until they were able to put it in a bin. Now, I grew up in a family of 8. There was a mum and dad and 6 kids, and we had two 55-litre services a week. But all our compost went into the garden up the back. So we had wet garbage and dry garbage. So composting was just what you did. Now we introduced a green waste bin in Sutherland in 2001, I think. I have never put my green waste bin out for service. Everything is composted on site. My kids are rabid composters. My wife we all compost. We mow the lawn, we do it. Everything's managed on site. And I don't get a reduction in my rates, but anyway. But the thing is, it can be done, and like Sunday afternoon used to be down the surf club having a beer. Now it's turn the compost. You can manage your life to do this stuff. We put out one bag in our red littered bin, right? And that's it. That's 2 old people living together. But we've got my daughter and her husband and 3 kids. 10, 8 and 5, we now have 2 bags in the red bin. We don't put any green waste out. We still compost everything down the back, but we do put out 2 recycle bins. Like, you can do it, but the issue for me is that back in the day, we were doing 10 kilos per household per week. The average household in those days was 3, it's now 2.7. We're probably doing 25 kilos of material coming out of a household now. And that's a huge increase. And you think, why? As I said, the green waste you could process on site. But the big impacts from my perspective, my KPIs was always about complaints and services and budgets and all that. In the 1980s, you had 3 men on a truck, and they service 2,500 households a week. Today, 1 man in a truck is doing 6,000 households. There's a guy at Sutherland who does 1,800 bins a day. He's amazing, but he's just across the road from Lucas Heights. Sorry, he works just close to Lucas Heights, so its turnaround times are pretty good. So you look at that sort of thing, and there was a contract awarded in 1989. The lift rate was $1.27. Right, that's 1989. You put CPI on that, which is over the 33 years, it would be $3.02 if you just had the CPI increases. Our costs of collection, the lift rate now is about $1.20, $1.10, $1.20, right? So in real terms, the cost of collection has reduced. In the old days, the waste disposal was that. The waste collection was that. Now, it's the other way. Disposal is the expensive part of the budget. Now, that's a good thing, obviously. The Section 88 levy has been probably the biggest influence in the way we provide services. The other interesting part about the Section 88 levy, it started off as, I think we got a couple of dollars per tonne of recycling we collected. It was like a rebate scheme. And then they figured out, well, actually, if we put a bigger levy on the on landfill, we'll encourage people to do it. And that's why, you know, I'd love to see the levy at $1,000 a tonne and put the money into education and hospitals or whatever. And that would just make recycling and reuse much more profitable. So the changes, the service costs have reduced, the margins have reduced. Like, there's that much competition in the market, so the costs are going down. Fuel efficiency. Back in the day, you'd use 15 to 16 litres an hour. Now, you're using 11 litres of fuel an hour. If you've got a fleet of 50 trucks, that's nearly $1 million a year. So, you know, those savings are incredible. The problem is we are a throwaway society. In Penrith, for example, in 2007, they had one clean-up truck servicing the LGA. Now they've got up to 6, and plus a mattress collection as well. So that's the sort of society we've become. I do think you can change people's behaviour, but it's that Maslow's curve. Like, if you're down around there, do you really care where your garbage goes? Do you really care what bin it goes in? So I think that we've got to take all that into account when we put these services out there. And so for me, the biggest changes have been the technology and the really positive impact of the Section 88 levy.
Thanks, Ron. They're great insights, aren't they? I mean, you hear these things, and a lot of people in the audience may never have known those statistics about trucks and obviously the war on waste and the things that have changed. But I'd be interested to hear from our younger panel members, Kat and Stuart. You know, what do you guys make of all of this? I mean, how do you think those achievements have created change, and how has that change been handled so far, do you think?
Yeah, thank you very much for your insights. It's really great to get that length of experience and wisdom. I've been in the sector for about 12 years now, and one of my frustrations is we're still talking about what goes in what bin. And I think in society we need to move past that. I think we need to actually look at our resources differently. And, you know, I would like to see a future where there is no need for a yellow bin. I know it's crazy idea, but you know, I really feel a bit frustrated by the conversations that we keep having in this industry. I think there's been some great achievements in collection infrastructure, in trucks and everything like that, but we need to start working at the bigger challenge here, which is designing out waste, and that's where I think we need to spend a lot of our efforts in society. I must say I have noticed a big change though, in the way that the public is responding to our sector. Since shows like War on Waste, there's a whole bunch more interest in what we're doing, and also there's a lot more political appetite. So, you know, for example, looking at Minister Plibersek, she has a circular economy advisory group that my business partner's on, Mark Rawson, that actually looking to position Australia to actually advance in the circular economy space. So, yeah, my reflections is I think we've achieved a lot in terms of efficiency and effectiveness with the collections, but I would actually like to see us change the conversation, change the focus to actually reduce the need for bins as much as we can. And to Ron's point, you know, get rid of the throwaway society that we have.
Stuart, you're obviously new in the industry, but your work with Cleanaway, what's your sort of take on this so far?
Yeah, I was reflecting on that. So of the 140 years, I think I represent 2% of that in the industry. So I'll come with a different perspective on some things. I couldn't help but think through Anne's one there when we talk about wheelie bins. There's actually, I think, a comedian pointed this out, and relevant because last night we had the 1960s theme. We put Man on the Moon in 1969, and we put wheels on a bin in 1978. So I think, and that kind of leads me to, are we doing enough? Are we doing it fast enough? I think it was Anne's as well. 20 years of kind of stagnancy in the industry before, okay, what's next and what are we taking out of bins next? And how do we actually move forward and how do we control our waste? I think it's probably a challenge to all ourselves in terms of, are we moving fast enough? There's lots of challenges and we're probably going to go through those, but there's also lots of opportunities and how do we actually progress faster?
All right, thanks, Stuart. Do we have at this point any questions of the panel anyone would like to ask? I know we're just giving a bit of background at the moment, but down the back. Sorry, I don't know if we've got a microphone runner. Oh, here we go.
Annette Rahurtis from various organisations, but the Reconnect project. What's the answer about the lids on the bottles?
Well, it depends where you. It depends where you are in the industry. So
That was my point.
that is exactly the point. The industry can't decide themselves.
Take them off.
Okay, we've got another question down the front here, please.
G'day, thanks Simon, Excel Environmental. This question is at you guys with the experience here. So I'm just interested, what are some of the key features or characteristics that were sort of in place before one of these revolutionary ideas came about? So for example, bringing the first recycling bin or changing. What was sort of happening at that time and what made those ideas get adopted? What are some of the trends basically for a good idea? How did it get across the line?
Good question.
Before recycling and everything started, there basically weren't any good ideas. Every council had its own little tip somewhere, a gully. I keep telling people about this and their jaws drop. I've got at home a report published by the Cumberland County Council in 1959, and it talks about Sydney's landfill capacity, and it maps out where all the different council landfills are and everything, and what are we going to do for the future. And it actually concludes that there is no problem with landfill capacity in the Sydney Basin, 1959. The reason? The Shoalhaven River, the Cooks River, Hawkesbury River, even the Nepean River, lots and lots of mangroves that need to be rehabilitated, and that can absorb the garbage. That was the thinking at the time. It's only when, in 1970 odd, that the government started to realise we've got to do something. This plethora of council tips everywhere, built to different standards or no standards at all, has got to stop. We've got to bring some order. So the answer to your question, unfortunately, is not much. And
I think when your boss introduced the rapid rail system, what do you think was the key element? Was it his motivation to push an idea through, or what was the turning point?
I think it was driven by cost, and it was driven by the garbos of the day pushing their boundaries to a point that it was unsustainable in terms of cost. And so there were safety issues, absolutely, but I think it was a cost-driven approach. And you could go from paying effectively 5 blokes' wages to paying 1, and you could get rid of a whole range of other issues at the same time. I mean, we were at Ku-ring-gai, and our garbos weren't obviously Ron's garbos, but they would throw, they'd throw the bins in the trees, they'd throw them on the front lawn, they'd throw them under a bus, they'd throw them anywhere. And Ku-ring-gai residents, who were all the would-be's if they could be's, didn't like it. And council had to keep paying to replace the bloody bins. So that was how you satisfied the QCs in the area. So it was a combination of things, but I really think it was cost. And just in answer to your question, I think the politicians it was to drive recycling, it was Canberra politicians that said we need recycling targets. To drive the garden organics bin, it was a politician that said we're going to ban waste to landfill. And I think it's also what we all totally underestimate is their policy advisors that are giving them information. So I think the policy advisors to politicians cannot be underestimated because they are the voice in their heads.
In defence of the garbage men of the day, not everyone was a fat bullfed throwing garbage bins around.
No, they were a fit footballer.
Well, actually, quite often, a lot of us were. A lot of us participated in sport. There was a lot of footballers. They weren't paid a lot of money, but you only worked 2 or 3 hours a day, and you ran, and you could actually turn it into most of us turned it into a training session. I used to row. You would do 2 40-minute runs and 1 40-minute drive. That was generally what it added up to. And those 2 40 minutes were if you did it properly, and you relitted the bin, the best day you had was when the supervisor had to get out of the car, take the lid off the bin and see if it was empty, because he didn't know we'd been down the street. You have that extreme of the people who threw them everywhere, but you had the other extreme of the people who just wanted to do it so well. I remember being on the back of the truck one day, finished the whole run, put the last bin down. It was on a bit of a edge or something anyway, and the bin just went boop and fell over. And the bloke beside me said, "Gee, Smithy, you're a bit rough." Like that, you did have that, but it was the issue. Or I think also people started to think about, is there a better way? And I do remember at Lucas Heights there was a massive leachate event into the Georges River. There was a creek that led into the Georges River. And the Georges River at that time produced the best oysters. The best Sydney rock oysters used to come out of the Georges River. None of them, I think a QX or some disease went through and killed them all, probably due to urban runoff. But anyway, so it really, when that sort of thing started to happen, people started to think more about, is there a better way to do it? And workers' comp was a big deal. It averaged if you had 100 people, each person would average two weeks a year. So it was a massive imposition. So you went from all those people getting injured to one bloke in a truck getting, a wrist injury from overuse. We know what that was from. But so what I think is that people did start to change. They actually thought it's more important to recover these resources. We also had, was it Australian Pulp and Paper Mills had a once a month newspaper collection. I remember that. And they ran and this was back in the 60s. I'm sure they ran their pulp and paper mill using recycled paper. So there was that sort of thing going on. And so I do think that people just started to realise that there was a value in this material and we should be doing something else with it.
Thanks, Ron. We might just keep rolling or move towards the outlook and opportunities. And I might just get Kat and Stuart to speak a bit more about this individually, just how you see, the industry from in perspectives where the challenges and particularly the opportunities might lie.
I'll jump in there. So when asked to think about this, I probably jumped to, because of my 2% experience on the panel, probably just taking a high level look about what are some of the macro themes that really going to change not only our industry but the world in which we operate as well. So for me, I think, and we've heard a lot about it already this week, net zero. But what does that actually mean, and what does that mean for us? So in terms of treatment, handling, certainly from a landfilling point of view, how do we capture that methane? How do we use that? We're converting it into CO2 from methane. Yeah, that's 26 times better. But is there more that we can do with that carbon dioxide as well, or moving to higher level things and taking out the decomposing materials in the first place? And also electrification. So we've got, I don't even know how, my colleagues will be able to tell us how many trucks on the road, but there's how many trucks now only burning 11 litres an hour, but it's still 11 litres an hour across Australia. Electrification is going to be massive in terms of the future, but having run transfer stations now for a relative short period of time, what scares me about that is batteries. We're going to be replacing a problem still with a problem, and how do we handle those batteries, you talk about electrification, you kind of got 10-year lifetime in some of those batteries. What happens in 10 years as we start to see all the Teslas start dropping off and their battery doing what my iPhones tend to do and decreasing over time, and I think that's the opportunity in terms of electrification.
Do you see hydrogen in the mix there, Stuart, for trucks, for garbage fleets?
I do. I'm just full disclosure, also a chemical engineer. So I just really love the thought process of hydrogen, burning it and getting water. It's neat. It's just making sure that the fuel storage and capabilities and the engines are able to do that, and there's a network. So it's got its challenges, but certainly massive opportunity there as well. And I think for me, linking that back through to landfills, high sources of hydrogen, both through ammonia and through in the leachate and through the methane, there's got to be a level of circularity, well, probably not circularity, but reuse for that material there as well. So net zero is one of those macro trends. I think really, and Omar touched on it this morning there, how we actually view waste versus resource, the hierarchy, and to me that really comes down to product design and stewardship. I do have small kids, and it was my now 5-year-old's daughter's birthday just in April, and one of her presents, the amount of packaging actually weighed more than the toy that she received, which she loved, and it was great for that 20 seconds while she was unwrapping it. And then I saw all of that and I looked at it, and most of it's going to be too small to go through a MRF, and it's all going to end up in landfill. And I think the people in this room are probably the wrong people for us to even be talking to in terms of really changing the dial around waste as a resource. It starts with marketers, it starts with product designers, it starts with those people. At the end of the day, probably most of the people in this room are the ones that are dealing with it once it's already been through. So I think it's actually a whole new marketing industry for waste as a resource to actually get the buy-in at the front end rather than just waiting to deal with it at the back end. And for that brings new skills, new people, so plenty of new opportunities as well. So marketing people, engineers, a whole lot of AI that's going to come our way as well in terms of smarter ways of doing things. So going from however many people, 3 people in a truck down to 1 person in a truck, to will we see self-driving vehicles doing the collections all together. So I think that's the future of where we'll get to. So we've now got our hydrogen-powered vehicle driving around, collecting things, but again, there's challenges there too. So the smarts around those vehicles, are they going to be able to pick up 6,000 bins in a day if their smarts are so smart that they'll never run over a person and people just run out in front of the trucks because they know it's not going to hit them? There's all those challenges to be faced by the industry, and those are probably just a small one. And the final one for me, and it got a lot of airplay yesterday as well, is around social license. I think, to me, there's got to be, social license is great, but there's got to be the political will in the first place to say, this is the infrastructure we want for our waste and for our resource, and this is the areas in which we're going to do it. And so you plan for that. People know that that's where you're going to do it. So it's not up to proponents once they go, oh, I would like to put this energy from waste facility here or a recycling facility there, and then have all the local residents up in arms. This is planned, this is known, we're doing it, so let's get on with it. Because I think if we try and please everybody, we're not going to please anybody.
Good point. Kat?
Yeah, thank you very much, and I agree with you about the design of products and how they have to be more circular. So I guess when you asked me this question, I'm just thinking a little bit longer term, so maybe 30, 50 years old. Maybe I'm Ron's age by the time. Sorry, Ron, you're on that side of the room. So, no, but I was thinking about, what are the opportunities for our sector? And yes, I think we need to transition to a circular economy. And if anyone heard Tony Chappell speak yesterday, he mentioned that 80% of the environmental impact of our products are determined in the design phase. So the opportunity is really to think beyond what goes in the bin and to think about how do we redesign Australia's economy to be more circular. And then the next question is, where does that leave our waste industry? So I'll give you an example. If we look at our food system, at the moment, Australia's food system is incredibly linear. We waste $37 billion of food every year. One of the challenges, I don't know if you share this challenge, but as a two-person household, when I go to the shops, I want to buy something, for two people, but often it comes pre-packaged for four. And by the way, when I'm at the shops, I'm hungry, so I probably end up buying too much food. And it all comes in single-use packaging. So the way that the Australia's food system is designed at the moment is it's incentivising a lot of single-use packaging and it's incentivising a lot of food waste. But what if we redesign the food system? What could that look like? So at the moment, there's a trend towards grocery deliveries. What if, as a household, you put your meal plans in for the week, you ordered your groceries, and it was delivered from the warehouse direct to your door, so it never needs to go via a supermarket, thereby reducing food loss along the way? What if, when you put in your recipes for the week, they actually delivered the exact right amounts of groceries, so you didn't end up with half used up ingredients? And what if that food was delivered in reusable, returnable packaging that can be backloaded by the vehicle that delivers your groceries and washed and recirculated? What if we could redesign the whole food system so it's more circular? So that's where my mind is. How can we redesign the economy to be more circular and think about, what roles we can play as an industry to help facilitate that? Obviously, we've got a role in terms of policy making, to make that conducive, and maybe the likes of Cleanaway, in the future could diversify their operations to not just be picking up recycling, but also to be transporting as a logistics company, essentially you are that, about actually backloading and recirculating the packaging and resources in the economy. So I see there's a really big opportunity, but there's also lots of barriers, which I don't know if you want to touch on now, Greg.
No, just leave it at that at the moment. I think we might have a bit of interest. Certainly just one thing, Kat, in the 1960s, when I was a kid, the bakery used to deliver bread at home, and that wasn't packaged. It was just in a paper covering. The milkman came, and we put the tin out the front, and the milk was manually filled. And the meat, the butcher would deliver the meat at home as well, because we only had one car in the family. So I think the system you're talking about, with tweaking, can work exactly like that, but just expanded. But do we have any other questions at this point in time? We've got one online. Okay. Where do you see the waste to energy, and is it really a viable option? So that's a good one to throw in the mix.
Just before I hand over to Ron, there's a really interesting quarterly essay at the moment by a guy called Saul Griffith, electrifying everything. He did a lot of work over in the States. I've only just started reading it. You're getting old when instead of staying up all night drinking, you go home, you go back to your room and read a book. But it's really quite interesting the way he talks about it. But the other thing he talks about is, as he's travelling around Australia promoting something, the number of women who are in leadership roles in the community for this sort of thing, promoting recycling, promoting more sustainability. And the interesting thing about this conference, I think the first conference there was 6 women, and now I think it's 50%. Half. It's unbelievable. So,
yeah.
At the first conference, 6 women. But don't forget, in those days, there were very few women involved in the waste industry at all. Now they're everywhere. It's
They are.
No, hang on. I don't mean it that way. I've got 4 older sisters, so I'm used to it. It's okay.
I might just get Ron Wainberg, the question about waste to energy opportunity. I might get Ron Wainberg just to address that, Ron.
Okay, everyone get out your rotten eggs, because now's your opportunity to start throwing them. I think that is an excellent question. I don't know who asked it, but congratulations, it's incisive, and you've hit the nail right on the head. We're talking about a circular economy. That's the objective today. But I'd like everyone to just stop for a minute and think, what is a circular economy? A circular economy to me is a way of thinking. It's a great way of thinking. It's what is needed to design out waste and stop making the stuff so that we have a waste problem in the first place. But do not think for a moment that a circular economy will be a physical reality. I'm sorry to say, I just can't see it happening. We can maximise resource recovery, we can maximise recycling, but we're still, just simply because of the second law of thermodynamics, we are still going to have stuff that needs a home. Put it at a household level, you've got your bins out the front, I've got my red bin. What am I going to do with the stuff in the red bin? I'll minimise it, sure, that's great, but there's still going to be stuff there. If I have a disaster, another flood, another bushfire, I'm going to have a lot of material that I've got to do something with. Right now, today, there are 2 technical options of what to do with that material. They are bury it or burn it. Sorry, but that is the reality. So energy from waste ideally would not be necessary, but that is ideally. If we are going to go circular, if we do achieve circularity, you won't need it. But can we achieve circularity? Ask yourselves that question. And if we can, how long will it take? Germany, I understand, classes itself, or as someone's figured out, it's 10% circular. This is the home of this type of thinking, and they're only 10%. They have minimal landfill, they have very high recycling, and they have energy from waste, energy recovery. I think we need to have an informed debate about energy from waste. It has to be, get rid of all the emotion and all the misinformation and have a proper debate about it based on facts. Now, get your rotten eggs out and start throwing them.
Thanks, Ron. Any questions following on from that? Okay.
You know, Ron, where do I start? Look, I don't disagree that we're always going to have some waste that we need to manage, and sometimes energy from waste is going to be the best option. But I think we need to spend our energy, excuse the pun, and our resources, our financial resources, and invest them in the right area. We could spend a lot of time with, developing waste to energy facilities and spending millions and millions of dollars to set them up. Or we could invest that time in redesigning our economy and making sure we have the right policy settings and legislation to actually facilitate a circular economy. I just think here we go. Look at this. He's picking up the microphone, folks. But I think we have. There's an opportunity cost here, is what I'm saying. With all these discussions, is that we need to make sure we're putting the priorities on influencing design for circularity, on reuse. If you were in Omar's talk earlier today, he talked about the value of reuse in the economy. There are so many triple bottom line benefits of that. We must not lose sight of that opportunity. So I think I agree with you. We're never going to get rid of waste entirely, but I would hate for that to mean that, okay, now we're going to focus a large amount on energy from waste. Oh my gosh, you want to say something too?
Good debate to start, so great question. I'll probably play the middle ground there, in that I don't think what you're saying is mutually exclusive. I don't think, again, we talked about not being linear in our thinking. I don't think it's energy from waste or circularity. We need to address all of them. Yes, there's lots of money to be invested in energy from waste, but I mean, in my short time in the industry, my quick back of the envelopes, I think the EPA's received checks for about $2.5 billion just from waste levy. And I think just investing half of that would have gone a long way to solving a lot of the problems we're talking about. So I think I agree with Ron. I think there is a place for energy from waste, but its place is already put out in the waste hierarchy, as Omar reminded us about this morning. It's down there. It's slightly above landfill, but that's where it is. So I think we've got to address all the areas, focus on the top, which I think's your point, but we can't ignore the bottom, because there is a lot of volume that comes through to the bottom as well that we've got to deal with.
And just, what's your take on the packaging side of this that Kat brought up? Do you think we need to regulate packaging, or do you think we need to educate people to the point that they shift the dial on what type of packaging is created? Because you work in the field of obviously measuring this.
It's more than just packaging. It's absolutely everything. You know, washing machines, white goods, electronics, phones, everything that we have got designed obsolescence in them. Like, you know, my mother's washing machine, I'm sure she had it for 25 years, and it went to the absolute death. And now you're lucky to get 2 years out of a washing machine. An iron, anything, everything, you know, Bunnings, you can go and buy everything. Everything is so cheap, and everything is replaceable. Nothing is repairable. And I think we need to look to Europe, who are now looking at design guidelines to make manufacturers design for recycling and reuse. And I just think industry just bleats, and you know, the motto of, you know, planet, profit, people, or people, profit, planet, I think it's all about profit, and they've forgotten about the planet entirely, and we are just the minions in between. So I think government really has to step up and face off with industry, and until that happens, we're just the takers of all of these goods. And globally, we are just a complete taker, because we manufacture so very little in the country. So we are just given whatever comes out of China, Vietnam, Asia, wherever. So I just think that the Commonwealth, it's a Commonwealth responsibility, and government really needs to step up. And until they do that, industry will just do the minimum amount that they have done, and look at the history of what they have done, which is not very much.
If I can just add to that, I 100% agree with what you're saying. One of the challenges, of course, is a lot of the goods that we buy are made overseas, you know, low-cost resources. And so when they break, you know, in your house, and to repair it, often the cost is so prohibitive, because the cost of labour in Australia is a lot higher. So not only do we need, like, the right to repair and good legislation around that, we actually need financial changes in our economy to actually make it viable to repair. I would love to see a tax on virgin resources, for example, or some sort of financial incentive to actually make it economically viable to repair. The other option that we have is looking at business models, and this is something that they're doing in the Netherlands, is looking at, well, instead of buying white goods, and this is such a crazy idea to even, to me, you know, why don't you lease them? So what they're doing over there is, instead of buying your washing machine or your dishwasher, you're actually leasing it. And what that means is that the business that is leasing you the white good has an incentive to make sure it lasts as long as possible, because if it breaks down, guess what? It's their problem. So, you know, it is, and then from the business's perspective, if you're leasing the items, well, that's good cash flow, and that's what businesses love. They know they're going to have that regular cash flow. So, you know, it'd be interesting to see if the business model takes off. It really is in its infancy in places like the Netherlands, but I see an opportunity there for business models like this to help address this problem with our throwaway society and planned obsolescence, in addition to right to repair and taxes on virgin resources. So there's a huge opportunity there.
Good stuff. We've got about 10 minutes left in the session. It seems to fly, doesn't it? But what I'd like each of the panellists to do, starting with you, Kat, is if you could just each come up with 3 key priority areas for us to develop individually and as an industry, and hopefully all of you might address the skills, qualifications, training side of things that we haven't sort of talked about so much yet. Kat?
Yes. I haven't talked about it yet, but I'm a big data nerd personally. And so one of the areas I really, really feel we need to improve is the way we're measuring success in society. We keep coming back to diversion as the measure for success. And I feel like that's such a crude measure because it doesn't value the value of the actual items that we're recovering. So we need much more advanced measures for reuse and for transitioning to a circular economy. So we need a lot more smarts in that space. And we also need more people, environmental economists who are actually going to be able to reform our tax system and be able to reform the financial incentives to help drive the circular economy. So we need people who look at it from a different lens. So, yeah, that would be my thoughts.
Right. Not sure if I've got three, but the ones that really stick out to me is just some real leadership from the governments in terms of policy setting and consistency in that, so that there's a framework in which people can go into with certainty. We touched on energy from waste there, and I think New South Wales has been a confusing state for the last 5 years in terms of what that actually means, which again just delays anything. So some clear policy guidelines that set out this is what we're doing. It doesn't have a short-term 3-4 year political cycle view on the world, but this is how we lay things out. And to me, the key skills that we need around that, and skills for the industries, really around marketing, getting the message out there. The quick poll that Anne did, we don't even know ourselves in terms of what to do or what not to do. So how do we expect everybody else to? There's lots happening, but what's the clear, concise message for the punter on the street to actually understand and have that conversation and know what they've got to do? And I think some clear cut-through messaging will go a long way.
Good stuff.
I think we need to improve our national standards. I was looking at an engine, I think it was a Briggs and Stratton motor on a lawnmower, and it said made in Milwaukee or whatever. And it's something along the lines of this engine cannot be used in the United States because it doesn't satisfy the emission standards. And I thought, well, why are we buying it when it doesn't even satisfy their emission standards? We have such low standards in terms of our emissions in cars and all other bits and pieces. We need a national approach to standards, and whether it be reducing packaging, it doesn't matter what it is, but it needs to be a national approach. And listening to Rebecca from Planet Ark, I thought I was back at University of New South Wales listening to those radical lunatics talk about conscription or something. It was fantastic to see that passion, but so articulate and so level-headed, the way she approached it. So again, another woman, like, in other words, they're taking over. But I do think, but the other thing, and this is my older sister, I was talking to her about this, and she said, waste the noun or waste the verb. We're really good at managing waste, as in the noun, right? But we waste stuff. We waste resources. We waste energy. We waste whatever, the verb. The verb is not what we're very good at. So that's probably mine. And the other thing is we need to build capacity in the young, give them the opportunity and get rid of HECS. Make tertiary education free and accessible to everyone.
Okay, so my three probably will be of no surprise. So we need a national Recycle Right campaign. We need to figure out what it is that we're going to tell the people, have one song sheet and all sing from the same sheet, and do it loudly and do it everywhere nationally. We need EPR on all of the industry sectors that they have to, if they make it, they take it. Visy, that's their motto. We make it, we take it. Well, why the hell doesn't everybody else do the same thing? And yes, they're vertically integrated. Well, the other companies need to get vertically integrated as well. And it's not just about packaging. We all bang on about packaging because that's what we see. But it's all the other problematic, bulky waste that we are seeing that is generating all the waste. So EPR program for everybody, and that needs leadership. And we need leadership both at a bureaucratic level within government, and we need politicians that can just be bold and brave and stand up to industry, and if they would do that, they would have everybody behind them voting them in next, because that's what I think we really lack is leadership.
Anne might have a career in that, actually.
And you've just shaken me to the core. I heard you say that last bit at a conference in 1996-97. Exactly the same thing. Politicians, please take leadership. And guess what? You still have to say it. I can only reiterate what everyone else has said. We need to have leadership at a political and a bureaucratic level. It's got to be national. This is a national problem. The issues are national. It's absolutely idiotic to be talking about EPR schemes or managing plastic bags or whatever at a local government level. This is a national problem. It should be done nationally, and the federal government has to take control of it. If that means changing the Constitution, let's have another referendum. For God's sakes, let's get serious. The standards have to be throughout the country in the leadership. I think they're the core things.
Thanks, Ron. Just prior to us finishing, I thought I'd just grab something that hasn't been talked about too much, and maybe, Kat, you could address this. Technology and AI, how do you see that working in our industry? And do you see the potential there to bring some of this, what we've been talking about, together, utilising AI and technology?
I was in a session yesterday about it, and it's fascinating. I see, was in the session with a couple of councils who were talking about an organisation and talking about integrating AI into trucks with the cameras, and so you can actually identify people contaminating their bins. Where I think there's an opportunity is to link that with feedback loops. There's no point having technology and measuring all these things if you're actually not going to complete that feedback loop. So then, if someone contaminates the bin and puts something in the wrong place, to actually provide that feedback. So, yeah, I do see it as an opportunity for the sector. I think it can help reduce a lot of contamination and help people with sorting their bins. But I am very keen on, looking at how we can design out waste in the first place, having said that. So.
Excellent. Any last comments or questions? Well, we're right on time, so I'd like you to join me in thanking our illustrious panel up here.